Hey there folks, welcome to a Marvelous Gamers video. Now, who doesn't like some occasional side-scrolling beat-em-up action in their video games? In a world that's obsessed with AAA studios pumping out soulless slop, this genre harkens back to a time when gaming actually meant something. With the release of Terminator 2D No Fate, it has drawn back attention to the beat-em-up genre. And if you're looking for more of the same, you need not to go further. In this video, I will be exploring the absolute best 14 must-play beat-em-ups or action games if you're addicted to Terminator 2D No Fate. Let's begin! Streets of Rage 4, 2020. I remember Streets of Rage 3 was one of the first games I ever received from my Sega Genesis back in the day. Little did I know at that time that I would have to wait for almost 26 years for a sequel. When Streets of Rage 4 finally came out in 2020, the IP had been licensed by Sega to 3 developers, Dotemu, Lizard Cube, and Guard Crush Games. The game retains the classic side-scrolling beat-em-up style and sees the player return to Wood Oak City, the setting for the original games. You can play the game solo or co-op. The catch is that online co-op only supports 2 players, while couch co-op will allow up to 4 players to play together. The story takes place 10 years after the events of Streets of Rage 3. Axel Stone makes his return as the protagonist of the series. However, this time, instead of his old nemesis, Mr. X, he must save the streets from X's twin children, Mr. and Miss Y. As I battled waves of enemies, destroying them with disposable weapons and special moves, nostalgia hits me hard. And I'm happy to report that despite some changes to the combat system, Streets of Rage 4 is absolutely a worthy entry into this beloved franchise. And if you enjoyed Terminator 2D No Fate, this will definitely speak to you as well. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, 2022. I was one of the many kids growing up whose favorite suddenly became pepperoni pizza single-handedly due to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Combine that with my obsession with video games, and there wasn't a single TMNT game that I missed out on. Imagine my surprise as an adult when, in 2022, Tribute Games developed a side-scroller beat-em-up TMNT game titled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. The game is heavily inspired by the visual aesthetics of the 1987 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle animated series, and the Turtle games developed by Konami between the 80s and the 90s. The story mode sees the Turtles and their friends battling through New York and Dimension X to stop the nefarious scheme of Shredder and his minions. Their old enemies like the Foot Clan Ninjas, Rocksteady, and Bebop, Krang and Shredder all make their return. What I found especially cool is the fact that the game supports up to 6 players in co-op mode. Now, you must be thinking, aren't there 4 Turtles? So how can we play in the 6-player co-op mode? Well, this is because April O'Neil and Master Splinter are both playable characters as well, with Casey Jones being an unlockable character. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge delivered the Ninja Turtles experience that we are all familiar with, and then some. For me though, the fact that you're not just getting a great side-scroller beat-em-up similar to Terminator 2D No Fate, but also an awesome Ninja Turtles experience made this the easiest recommendation on this list. The Ninja Saviors Return of the Warriors, 2019. If you were old enough to have owned the SNES console, then this next entry into our list will probably sound familiar. However, the name sounded quite familiar to me, although I couldn't quite place my finger on it. After some digging around, I realized that the Ninja Saviors Return of the Warriors is actually a full remake of the SNES title The Ninja Warriors Again. Much of the game remains the same, including the levels and gameplay, with the addition of 2 more characters, raising the roster size to 4. These 2 new characters need to be unlocked by beating the game at least once. The other addition to this version of the game is a 2-player co-op mode. The visual aesthetics of this game are reminiscent of the Terminator 2D No Fate with hand-drawn pixel art that has aged really well. The characters are all distinct, with each having their own unique movesets and strengths, which makes each playthrough relatively fresh. Every level feels like a new neighborhood to explore, with challenges that make you think and act carefully. This action-packed side-scroller hack-and-slash game was originally released in 2019 for Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4. You can now play it on PC, as it's available on Steam as well. In my personal opinion, this has to be one of the most underrated games in this genre, and one you need to check out for yourself. Fight and Rage, 2017. Following up on our previous entry, I have got another underrated gem for you, titled Fight and Rage. This side-scroller beat-em-up was developed by the folks at Seba Games Dev and released for Windows in 2017, followed by ports to all major consoles and platforms. The game is an instant homage to the early 80s and the 90s, when these pixelated visuals and game style dominated the video game industry. It has all the bells and whistles of the beat-em-up genre, with 2D animations, disposable weapons, hordes of enemies, and tough boss fights. To my surprise, this game has a lot of alternative endings, paths, and cutscenes depending on your decision and the characters you choose. The game is set in a future where Earth has been taken over by mutants following a cataclysmic event called the Big Pulse, which ended society as we know it. This was basically a massive global electromagnetic pulse that wiped out electric technology from the planet. With the collapse of society, it's now survival of the fittest, with humanity being enslaved under the rule of a powerful mutant simply called the Boss. It's now up to 2 human renegades and a mutant rebel to put an end to his reign of terror and save the world. In my playthrough, I played solo, but you can have up to 2 of your friends join you for local co-op to beat this game. Fight and Rage might be a throwback to a bygone era, but it will still bring out the child within you, I promise. Metal Slug 3, 2000. If you're looking for a game that has zombies, aliens, soldiers, and war machines all packed in one place, then look no further than Metal Slug 3. Developed and published by SNK, this side-scroller run-and-gun series continues the story of Rossi and Roving as they shoot their way through hordes of enemies before standing in front of a massive and complex boss at the end of each level. Outside of the usual gunplay, I noticed that there's also a generous amount of instances where you will have to rely on melee attacks to carve your way through to your objective. The game adds several new features, including newer vehicles and weapons for us to use. There's also a branching narrative, which gives some scope for replayability. The game was originally released in arcades before being released on the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC later in the game's life cycle. If you have never tried the Metal Slug series but have always wanted to dip your toes in it, my recommendation is that you start with this one. The story's not really the game's forte, so you won't be missing out on much, and each game can be played as a standalone experience. Definitely give this one a shot.
Final Vendetta!
Final Vendetta, 2022. With the world moving toward retro in all things, I've noticed video games have been no strangers to this phenomenon as well. Final Vendetta, developed by Bitmap Bureau, continues to bear the torch for side-scrolling beat-em-up even as late as 2022. This game delivers the classic retro gameplay of a 90s beat-em-up, complete with the pixel graphics, hard-hitting soundtrack, and gameplay nuances of that genre with a modern touch. The story is fairly simple, like most other games in this genre. So it goes like, the streets of London have become the hunting grounds for a notorious criminal organization called the Syndicate Gang. Things finally come to a head when our protagonist, Claire Spark, a martial artist, has her sister kidnapped by the gang. Joining forces with the wrestler Miller T. Williams and bare-knuckle brawler Duke Sancho, Claire will have to fight through 6 different levels as she tries to rescue her sister and crush the gang responsible for her disappearance. The game features a 3-man local co-op system which will have you blasting through the streets of London with your friends, dismantling your opponents left, right, and center. Final Vendetta is definitely one of the better homages to this classic genre to have come out in recent times, and I had a blast playing it.
Double Dragon Gaiden!
Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons, 2023. I was surprised to find a Double Dragon game that had been released as recently as 2023. Most retro gamers are quite familiar with the iconic Lee brothers from the Double Dragon franchise, and this game continues their story, acting as a prequel to the very first game. This is not a mainline Double Dragon game, but a spin-off. Developed by Secret Base and released in 2023, this Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragon received favorable reviews from critics, but the fans had a somewhat mixed opinion about it. While most fans were happy to receive another game in this iconic franchise, many complained about the apparent lack of polish and visual art direction that this entry adopted. The story is set in 1990X in the post-apocalyptic New York City, which is controlled by 4 powerful gangs. Jimmy and Billy must fight through levels infested with these gang members and defeat their bosses after their friend Marion is injured during a gang conflict. Not to spoil too much, but depending on the choices the player makes, there's a huge reveal that ties the game to Double Dragon 2: The Revenge. And what makes this game unique from the others in this list is that, as I was playing, I discovered that this was not just a side-scroller beat-em-up like the rest. It also has some roguelike elements to it as well, making each gameplay somewhat fresh. The base game also includes an incredible 13 playable characters, including some series favorites. Each time a gang boss is defeated, the remaining bosses become increasingly difficult, adding that extra layer to not just combat, but strategy as well. Even though I played it on PC, the game is said to run smoothly on all the major consoles on which it is released. While not the strongest entry into the Double Dragon franchise, it's still worth your time in my opinion. River City Girls 2, 2022. If you are an anime fan like me and enjoy your side-scroller beat-em-up games as well, then boy, have I got a game for you. River City Girls 2 is a side-scroller beat-em-up, which is a sequel to the River City Girls developed by WayForward and published by none other than Arc System Works and Crunchyroll for the mobile version. It continues the story of the first game, but this time around, Misako, Kyoko, Kunio, and Riki are joined by 2 newcomers, Marion and Provi. The addition of these new playable characters, along with a returning cast, gives a massive sense of continuity and escalation, as if the world is expanding alongside the chaos. When an old foe from the first game returns for revenge, the gang must band together to put an end to his nefarious schemes once and for all. River City is considerably bigger, louder, and more alive than the previous game. While the game retains the side-scroller beat-em-up gameplay, the overall experience has been enhanced with additional moves, weapons, and ways to defeat your enemies in style. In this way, it addresses a lot of shortcomings and complaints about the previous game's combat. This time around, they have also added multiplayer gameplay, allowing split-screen local co-op for up to 2 people. River City Girls 2 is definitely a massive upgrade over its predecessor, as it expands on the formula of the first game with an immediate sense of confidence, throwing players back into a chaotic, neon-lit River City. This was one of the easiest games for me to recommend for you in this video. Mother Russia Bleeds, 2016. Out of all the games that I have recommended to you so far in this video, there's none as mature or as ultra-violent as this one. When I first picked up the game, the title heavily misled me into thinking it was a game with a spoof narrative. I mean, how violent and mature can a 2D side-scroller pixelated game really be? And boy, was I wrong. Mother Russia Bleeds is a 2016 game, developed by Lake Cartel Studio, and published by Devolver Digital. It is a video game that combines the usual visuals and mechanics found in a beat-em-up game with a dark and unsettling setting. The story happens in an alternate version of Soviet Russia, where 4 imprisoned street fighters escape from the government after they are subjected to horrific experiments. Finally free, the 4 go on a violent rampage fueled by vengeance under the influence of an experimental drug. Despite the pixel art visuals, every instance of blood and gore feels brutal to witness, backed by pounding electronic tracks. The game allows for 4 people to play together, and unlike other games, playing solo can feel relatively difficult compared to the co-op version. While not without its flaws, like unreasonable difficulty spikes and repetitive enemies, Mother Russia Bleeds offers something distinctly unique, in my opinion, which is enough for it to be included by me in this list. The Punisher Arcade, 1993. Having covered some modern titles in this genre, I think it's time I dug into the archives to give you a somewhat forgotten game from the late 90s. The Punisher Arcade is a side-scroller action game developed by Capcom back when AAA studios still dabbled in genres like this, instead of just indie devs. The game follows the normal Punisher story where Frank Castle has his family killed by the villains, which leads him to adopt the Punisher persona. The former Marine turned vigilante then goes on a killing spree, taking down mobsters and their leaders on his path to vengeance. The game is significant beyond its existence because it marked the beginning of a successful partnership between Capcom and Marvel, which would ultimately give us games like Marvel vs. Capcom. This is the game that started it all. So, as the Punisher, you will shoot, zap, and pummel through New York City in all its pixelated glory. This game was released for the Sega Genesis back in the day and can be found for PC if you look hard enough on the internet. In its heyday, this game was considered the most popular arcade game in Japan, and after playing it, I can see why. Contra 3: The Alien Wars, 1992. Anyone who has ever touched a video game is familiar with the Contra franchise. Contra 3: The Alien Wars, which came out in 1992, is a side-scroller 2D run-and-gun style video game developed by Konami. 4 of the 7 stages are presented in the traditional 2D side-scroller style, while the remaining 2 were delivered with an overhead camera. As usual with any Contra game, I sank into my chair ready to spend a few hours taking down alien scum and protecting the planet as a massive bicep soldier, and this game didn't fail to deliver. The main protagonists of this game are Commandos Bill Riser and Lance Beam, whom you can control either in a single-player or two-player co-op mode. It contains the usual Contra gameplay, where players can upgrade their guns by absorbing power-ups scattered throughout the levels while shooting them mid-somersault. The game delivers a pretty epic Contra experience with just a tad bit of innovation. While it was well received when it first came out, the praise that the game receives has only increased as time has gone by. I, for one, found this to be a thoroughly enjoyable experience and immediately took me back to my Game Boy and SNES days, where I would spend days blowing up aliens, all the while somersaulting to glory. I'd say don't think twice, just pick this one up. Blazing Chrome, 2019. Recently, I was just looking for a game to scratch my run-and-gun gameplay itch, having just completed some Contra and Metal Slug games. This was when I found Blazing Chrome, another side-scroller run-and-gun game, very similar to the aforementioned series. In this world, instead of aliens, robots have taken over the world, and humanity is considered expendable. We play as one of the 2 characters who are part of a group on a suicide mission to destroy the power plant that powers the AI, which controls the machines. The only way to describe the gameplay of this game is that there is beauty in its simplicity. You traverse through 2D maps, upgrading weapons along the way, while dodging and rolling to victory against endless hordes of enemies and impossibly tough bosses. If you like this genre but are looking for something challenging, then Blazing Chrome is the one for you, because even in its easy mode, I personally found it a tad bit difficult compared to many other titles on this list. Every stage is a barrage of perfectly timed chaos with bullets, enemies, and explosions that constantly force you to react, adapt, and learn. Every section is designed to test a different skill, which makes this game an easy game to pick up, but one that is hard to master. This game also features a PvP mode alongside a co-op system for you to spend countless hours after finishing the main story quest. Blazing Quest, while not as polished or hyped as some of its competitors, is still an extremely fun game to spend some time with. Mayhem Brawler, 2021. Mayhem Brawler is another 90s-inspired side-scroller brawler game that is developed and published by Hero Concept. It features a beautiful comic-style visual aesthetic that has been hand-drawn frame to frame. It adds a certain level of timelessness to its visuals, and, even after 5 years, the art style holds up pretty well. It follows 3 superpowered cops who find themselves embroiled in a conspiracy that will threaten not only to alter their own lives, but also the fate of their city. I found the combat to be extremely slick and tight, with each character presenting enough uniqueness to add a different layer to the gameplay, keeping it fresh. The game is also fully voice acted with a stellar soundtrack that matches the ground and pound happening on the screen. While most of the games in this genre are fairly linear, Mayhem Brawler offers multiple endings depending on player choice. Unfortunately, I took about 45 minutes to beat the game, and for some of you god gamers out there, you might even take less than that. The game, therefore, is extremely short, despite all the great things it has to offer. If you're looking for a game you won't have to sink hours into with fluid gameplay, a passable story, and a unique visual style, then Mayhem Brawler is the game for you. Alien Storm 1990. Time to hop on a time machine and go back to the late 90s when a little game called Alien Storm was blowing on my tiny mind. The plot is simple enough, with a murderous race of aliens invading Earth, and the only thing standing between them and humanity is a special force team creatively named Alien Busters. The team is comprised of 3 playable characters, each of whom can be controlled by a player in either a single-player or local co-op campaign. I remember having to navigate through 6 missions that comprised several stages as I made my way from the streets all the way to the alien mothership, raining hellfire and justice upon the enemy. Each mission has additional objectives like rescuing a set number of hostages or destroying a certain enemy, with the aliens ambushing you from plants, host boxes, drums, and other items scattered throughout the level. The characters have some over-the-top special moves. For instance, you can call for a massive airstrike that damages enemies massively, and teleporting from one place to another, leaving explosives in your previous location. And if these 2 things weren't enough, you can summon a literal nuke to obliterate everything on screen. Now, how the aliens, or even you, survived that is up for debate. But that's just how crazy things were back in the days. Unless you own a classic console like the Atari, this one will be slightly hard to come by. But in case you do get your hands on it, be sure to give this one a shot as well. Marvelous verdict. And this wraps up our list of 14 must-play beat-em-up action games. If you enjoyed Terminator 2D, no fate. We explored everything from genre classics to modern titles that included both hidden games and gems that defined the genre in their day. I hope that with this video, you will now be able to go forth and actually try some of these games and decide for yourself which one you like the best. If we missed any game that you feel deserved its place on the list, let us know in the comments below. For now though, we will see you on the next one. Stay safe and stay marvelous.